Hi, everybody. We are at 1 o'clock instead of our usual 10:30 because Kristen Howerton lives in California, and Pacific time was not her friend for the 10:30 hour. So I am here and excited to be here with Kristen Howerton. She is the mom of four, a lapsed therapist. Is that still true? Are you
Yeah,
practicing?
I mean, I am licensed, but I'm not seeing clients right now.
Okay. Author of Rage Against the Minivan, which I didn't know what to expect, but I couldn't put it down. I really recommend everybody getting it. Do you have a copy near you?
No.
No. I meant to get mine, but I also forgot it. But everyone look it up. Rage Against the Minivan. It's really worth the read. It's so comforting to hear someone be honest about their life. And then there's a recent op-ed in the New York Times. I hate the mom that COVID has made me. And I'm sure most of us can relate to that sentiment. So thank you so much for being here. I also want to point out that your bio also, I think, includes as being a singer, and the list is very long. You're very talented. So thank you for making the time to talk to us. And I wanted to start with just a little bit of your backstory, which you tell in great detail in your book. And I, again, recommend everybody to take a look at it. You had a difficult journey to becoming a mom and having your family of four. And so can you just tell us, like, briefly, and don't give away too much because we do want people to go back and read the book.
Sure. Well, yeah, I didn't have a super linear path to motherhood. We struggled with infertility, and then we struggled with recurrent pregnancy loss. So I had about 6 miscarriages as I was trying to become a mom. And then I had always wanted to adopt. And so that was a pretty quick transition. But then our first child, we attempted to adopt from foster care. And it was just a very lengthy journey. He was our foster child for 3.5 years. And it was just kind of back and forth. We weren't sure if we would be able to adopt him or if he would be reunited with birth family. Ultimately, we did adopt him. And then during that process, I had a biological child. And then we decided we wanted to adopt another child so that my first child, who's Black, could have a racially matched sibling. So then we started the process of adopting from Haiti. That also took 3.5 years and a lot of twists and turns. And then during that process, I also had another biological child, Karis, my youngest. So yeah, it was a lot of drama.
Well, it's a journey to a beautiful family.
Yes, but yes, it was all worth it.
So, I mean, I never heard this phrase before, but I love it. You call yourself a skilled catastrophizer. So, first of all, did you make up that term?
I did.
And what does that mean in your world?
I mean, I struggle with anxiety. So it's lighthearted, but it is also true. I do tend to catastrophize. I tend to, get stressed about small things, lay in bed and overthink every conversation I've had in a day. So yeah, it is something that I am fairly good at.
Well, I mean, I guess it's good to be good at many things.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not the only one. So in your book and in general, in your writing, you have this bold honesty about what it's like. And you have 4 teenagers now, right? They're all teenagers?
Yeah. Well, my youngest is almost 12, so close.
Okay, so just about. And your honesty, you're clear that you have some boundaries around your honesty. Like if the story isn't your story to tell, you don't share.
Yeah.
So how does it feel right now as a mommy blogger to have your kids move into a space where are the stories theirs now? Like, how do you navigate that line? And is it becoming harder for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's interesting. For me, I feel like that line was a little sooner than the teen years. I really felt like post-toddler years, it kind of felt like, it's one thing to be writing and journaling the details of, toddler meltdowns or diaper blowouts. Those are all universal. Like every parent has experienced that. Every child will do that, do those things. But, as they got a little older, it felt like, okay, these are more specific. Like, the stories are more specific. And so I would say once they started school, I dialed back the personal stories and I just tried to keep it focused on myself and my own process. just to give my kids some privacy. I mean, I'll share, I'll share broad strokes and I'll share photos of them and I'll share cute anecdotes. But in terms of, the like, oh my gosh, my kids are driving me nuts, I try to dial that stuff back, the specific stories.
So it's a little interesting because that's exactly why we started Your Teen, because nobody really talks about adolescence, at least at the time. We've been doing it for 14 years. There's many more mommy bloggers now, but there's so much shame associated with any kind of failing. And so even in your space of like maybe not sharing as much as you used to, you still manage to capture a real honest, raw picture of what being a mom is. Like a lot of the struggles we have with our kids, they rely on us changing anyway, right? So how is it that you manage to capture and that you're willing to put yourself out there to share like some of the really challenging moments?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult balance. And I mean, to your point, I think it is difficult because we get a lot of honesty online from bloggers or experts, firsthand accounts of parenting from younger kids. But people really clam up in the teen years, which is understandable. I mean, my kids don't want me shouting online about their heartbreaks or their, screen time issues or the things they try to look at online. Those are embarrassing things, but they're also very relatable. So it's tough because, I know that there's a lot of topics that I could overshare about that a lot of other parents of teens would be like, oh my gosh, thank you. But then I have my kids who are also on the internet. So I think it's really difficult. I think I try to, when I do have a specific issue that I feel comfortable sharing, I'll usually just not share which kid it is, or I'll talk generically, like I might write an article on what to do if you find your child has looked at porn, but I'm not going to write, here's how it happened for me. So I will usually kind of write more generically, just here's a topic and here's what parents might experience rather than personalizing the story to myself.
It's such an interesting compromise at each stage. It feels so vulnerable. So I have a few articles that will never get shared because every time I check in with that one kid about the one article that I know needs to be shared, he says too soon. And I'm like, okay, well, how many years will it be too soon?
Yeah, right.
Totally. And so that does make the sharing of stories so challenging at a time when all we want to know is that we're not alone, right? Like that is the thing that's really the tough nut to crack. And sometimes I'm sure you've seen this also. You read an article where you feel like that was so not fair for that parent to share that moment.
Totally.
On the other hand, we benefit from that sharing. So it is a very tough call. I think you navigate it really well, and your book definitely navigates it really well. Okay, so you have a biracial family. Can we talk a little bit about like what that was like for you? And okay, so what do you feel like you were least prepared for in raising two Black sons?
That's such a tough one. I mean, I really felt like I was prepared and I really wasn't. I think you don't know what you don't know. That's what's so hard about it. I think I will say for me personally, I have a fairly multiracial family just in terms of my sister has Black kids, my other sister has Dominican kids, my brother and sister-in-law have a Black adopted child. So I thought, cool, our family has, a lot of diversity and so our children will be exposed to all this diversity, but I don't live in the same town as my family. And so I think that I did not, I think that I thought that would be more helpful than it has been. And I think what I learned pretty quickly is that I had to get my boys involved in our local Black community. Like that was totally imperative. And so, they are in a mentoring program, which has been such a godsend. But I think that I underestimated just the importance of regular interaction. Cousins are great, but they need people in their own town and in their daily lives. So
in your book, you talk about adopting Kemby from Haiti and the earthquake and just crazy stories. But when you finally get Kemby home, and into your family, you have some hard-earned lessons that I think as parents we should all learn, because it happened in that moment for you, but it's really something all of us should learn. So can you talk a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people who adopt kids who aren't babies have this experience. And Kevin was 3.5 when he came home. When a child has not been parented, has not been in a family situation, that might not be something that they're naturally interested in. And Kembe came home and he had never lived in a family, and he was kind of like, I'm not interested in this. Like, I'm not into this. I mean, we have a lot of orphan tropes that are very unhelpful. But, we have this idea that our children are just pining for mom and dad, that they're singing the song from Annie, gazing out the window, waiting for parents to arrive. And Kembe was very much pretty happy living his like Lord of the Flies parentless existence in an orphanage. And when he came home, he was like, I back off. Like, I don't want this. For a while. And it took a while for him to bond with us. But I think that, the lesson that I really learned that I think is important for every parent, because there will be times in all of our parent journeys where our love for our kids is not reciprocated. I mean, good Lord, the teen years, right? I mean, they are not always feeling loving towards us or reciprocating the love that we're giving to them. And I had to really love Kembe as a 3.5-year-old, very unconditionally and without any expectation of what I was getting back. Now, eventually we're very bonded. I mean, now he's actually my most demonstrative child. But, we're never guaranteed. We're never guaranteed that our kids are going to feel a certain way. And, it's interesting. I have worked, as a therapist with families with kids with autism or other issues where that kind of loving bond is more difficult. And, you never know as a parent. And so I think it is important for every parent to kind of walk through that journey of like, how do I love my children, regardless of what they're giving back to me? Because we're not owed anything, right? Like we don't love because then we get a warm fuzzy back. We love because they're our children. So it was a difficult path, but I do think I learned a lot from it.
So when you say we don't love to get something in return, I don't think that we do that. I think that most parents are expecting a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah.
And so you learned it because of these extenuating circumstances, but I think it would be a gift to all of us to pay attention to that and recognize that it can be very one-sided sometimes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially in the teen years. I think, I did have the advantage of I had been a therapist and worked with a lot of teens. And so I kind of knew how teens behave towards their parents. But, that there is a very natural kind of pushing away and individuating that teens do that can be very hurtful to parents and that can feel very personal. And I do think it's really important for us not to take it personally and just to kind of love with an open hand when they're in those teen years, because man, we might not be getting a lot of love back.
Well, having gone through it 5 times, I can testify.
Yeah. And that is, it's developmental. It's also cultural. I mean, it's a part of our American culture also. But it is developmentally, normative. I mean, it's not fun, but it is normative.
Yeah. Okay. So because of the construct of your family, you have a really front and center window into the disparity and the way your girls get treated and your boys get treated for being Black and being white.
Yeah.
So what would you say, first of all, are there any like shocking surprises to you, and what's the biggest disparity?
It's so tough because I think that there's never been a huge moment where, my boys were treated very overtly, with racism and my girls weren't, but there's a lot of microaggressions, like a lot of just kind of daily dings, things like, people asking my boys if they belong somewhere while my girls are standing right there. Or, I wrote about this in the book. There was an incident where we were at a restaurant and he went to go get a refill and he was asked, this is only for paying customers, he was told, where my girls had been up like 5 times getting refills and not being asked. So, it's a lot of those small microaggressions that build, and, that are very observable to me. And, it's tough because, I think a lot of white people like to deny those things and want to say like, well, maybe you're being oversensitive, or maybe it was just, but when you live it, when you observe it every single day, it becomes undeniable.
Also, you have an unusual, like, your girls go up and keep doing it. Your boys go up and get asked a different question. So it's right there. It's the clarity. Yeah. Okay. So this is very big to answer, but like, are you hopeful that we can change as a country?
I am. I am hopeful. I do see the younger generation engaging, especially, my kids' ages, like, Gen Z. I mean, we had Black Lives Matter rallies out here and, over the summer, and a lot of teenagers came out. A lot of teenagers were posting things. They were engaging in the process. So I do have a lot of hope, but I have a lot of concern too. I think that when we make progress, and especially as it pertains to race, and when equality swells, there is unfortunately an equal swell of pushback. And we're seeing that happen too. We're also seeing people, really kind of trying to grab power back. They're very scared about losing their seat at the privilege table. So, I think I feel hopeful, but I also feel realistic that we're going to continue to watch a pushback against racial equality from a large majority of people in our country for a while, unfortunately.
I hope you're wrong.
I hope I am too.
Right, obviously. Okay, so this is a little lighter but painful for people, and I think your story will be really helpful. So you found yourself, for a number of reasons, feeling a little lonely as a parent, and without the friendships you were craving. And so your story, I think, is not just important for us to hear as parents, but also to help our kids, because you reacted in such a proactive way. So tell us about that time.
Yeah, when my kids were young, I had a lot of trauma before I had kids. And we left a church community that was, we were very involved in, and some of those friendships kind of naturally broke apart. And so I found myself with, 4 really young kids. I mean, I had 4 under 4. All at the same time. I was overwhelmed, and I didn't have a lot of time, and my friendships were not in a great place. And I felt really lonely. Like, I really did not have the friendships that I thought I would have as a young mom. Like, I thought, I'll be a mom in a tribe, and I was a mom on an island, it felt. And so, around that time, I mean, this was, 2007, 2010, mommy blogs were kind of the thing. And I had a blog, and I was reading other blogs. And, this was back before we had Facebook and Instagram. And so you connected with people in the comment section. Blogs were a social media back then. I mean, it's very different now. But I was meeting other people, other women, other families like mine, but they lived in different places. And I kind of reached out to a couple of them and said, basically asked them out. Like, hey, do you want to be friends? Like, would you like to go a little deeper? And I did that with a couple other women, and kind of formed a tribe in a way that, felt a little foreign and a little weird, but it worked. And, 5 of those women are like my dearest friends now, and we get together once a year and we talk all the time. They're my go-tos.
Okay, so you were proactive with the online community, but you were also proactive with the in-person community.
Yeah.
So you did something around your kids' school.
I did. So I just really didn't know a lot of other moms. I remember a situation where I was had a doctor's appointment and was running late, and I'm like, I don't know a single other mom that I could call and say, hey, can you grab my kid after school? And that's a terrible feeling, And so I was like, I got to make friends at the kids' school. And so I hosted this, one year I hosted a back to school mimosa party at my house. After people dropped their kids off, they could come over to my house, and I just put out a bunch of mimosas, and I had 30 women show up. But a couple women stayed longer. And we just sat and we talked and we related. And like those women are now some of my dearest friends as well. And I do feel that I have a village, like locally, like, you know, if I'm running late to pick up, I have 5-6 women I could call and say, can you grab my kid? And they would be like, of course. But yeah, I really had to work at it. I mean, it didn't come naturally. I had to really put myself out there in some ways that felt really awkward and vulnerable.
I love this story because especially now, parents are so worried about their kids and like if they didn't have the social group before, how do they create one now? And if they had one but are kind of being ostracized right now. Yeah. And so it's the intention and like the putting yourself out there, even though it's awkward. We still do it as adults. I think it's such a great story to tell our kids that even as adults, we find ourselves in search of something and we can feel sad or we can do something. So.
Absolutely. And I've shared those stories with my own kids. I have one kid who had a really rough transition with a friend group, kind of, you know, felt a little ostracized and then was a little bit lonely for a while. And like, you know, I kept telling that kid, like, this happened to me, like this exact thing happened to me. And I understand. And, you know, let's brainstorm how you find your new crew.
And did it work?
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. There's someone out there for you who's waiting for you, right?
Yeah. Join a club. Find, you know, I mean, it's again, it's not always supernatural. Like we all want it to be natural, but sometimes you have to put a little effort into it.
Look at the online dating world. That certainly acknowledges that it can't always be natural.
Exactly. It's so true. And it's like, we have to apply some of those principles to our friendships if that's not working out either.
Okay, I'm going to end with your article in the New York Times. It's a great article. If you haven't read it, look it up. I hate the mom that COVID has made me. And I'm certain it resonates with anyone who's paying attention to COVID and kids. So tell us, like, who did you become that you don't want to be?
It's funny. I was just talking to my kids about this last night. Because they're having teachers tell them that they read my article. And of course, my kids are like, what article? What is she talking about? But I was just telling them how, like, before COVID, I mean, I'm a strict mom in certain areas. Like I'm a little bit strict on the screen time stuff and bedtime. But I was always like the mom who's like, go. Ride your bike, go get out of my house, like go to the skate park, go ride the bike to the beach. Like, you know, and then I was also the mom who always had kids in the house. Like that was a huge value for me. Like have your friends come spend the night, have your friends come, you know, skate here, swim here, what have you. And, you know, COVID, like I've just had to dial back on all of that because we're being very cautious. And so, you know, my kids, you know, if they go out, I'm making sure they're wearing a mask. We haven't had another child in our house since March 15th. You know, It's very quiet. It's very sad. And I really hate it. But at the same time, I don't want to catch COVID from my kids or from their friends. And so, you know, it just, I really dislike that I've had to become really strict on areas where I normally would have been more free range.
So are you feeling like you have to police a little bit more than you did in the past?
Oh my gosh, yes. Like, I mean, I talk about it in the article. I mean, I'm like, I'll let my boys go to the skate park because that feels relatively safe, but I want their masks on. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go check on you to make sure you're wearing your mask. And I'm driving by. Like, that is not me. Like, that is not the mom I want to be. I don't want to be like a spying, like checking up on you quietly in my car, mom. But I feel like I have to be because, you know, it just, I mean, I'm sure this is true everywhere, but it's like, you know, they go to the skate park and they're the only ones wearing a mask. It feels to them like they're the only kids whose parent is, you know, drawing a line. They're watching their friends, and it's not everyone, but it feels like that to a teen. You know, they're watching friends having slumber parties and, you know, group hangs, and, you know, they're feeling like they're the only ones whose lives have drastically changed and who are still quarantining. And that's not true, but, you know, it feels that way when you're a teen and you see any other person having freedoms that you don't have.
There is a huge like world of people living almost normally and people really pulling away and doing what the
Yeah.
recommendations are. So it's not entirely like everyone but me, because there is some of that going on.
Yeah, there is. And it's very painful. You know, it's hard. I really feel for them because, you know, I feel like when the pandemic started, like, you know, we all kind of collectively quarantined, and then people got tired of it. And, you know, I do think it would feel very different for them if everyone was in it together. But to be a teenager and feel like you're the one isolated and everyone's hanging out without you, that's a horrible feeling. I hate it. I really hate it for them.
So your article was that you hate the mom that COVID has made you, but you don't regret being the mom that you are during COVID.
I don't. You know, and I keep telling my kids that, like, you know, guys, I know this is really hard, but when we're on the other side of COVID, and, you know, when we look back on the history of this pandemic, I want to be on the right side of history. I don't want us to look back at that final death count and for you to feel like I contributed to that, like that we, you know, that we were those people who ignored, because, you know, I think, I mean, the numbers are already terrible, but I think, you know, history is going to look back on this as just, you know, a huge, huge loss of life. And I want my kids at the end of the day to feel like I wasn't part of that. Like, we did our best. I want them to feel like that. You know, I don't want them to look back and go, what were we doing? Like, why did we not take that seriously? You know?
Also, the fatigue at this point seems so misplaced to me. Like, the numbers are worse than they've ever been. And there's a vaccine. So
there's a vaccine.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's worse right now. So
no. I keep telling my kids that too. I'm like, guys, we've worked so hard. We're almost to the end. We're not going to blow it. Like we have to keep going, because there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay, I'm going to share. First of all, Doris agrees with you, but she says, what if your kid doesn't want to do anything? Yeah. She's just in her room all day. So how do you handle that in your house?
So I do have that kid. I have that kid. And I think a lot of people have that kid right now. I mean, I will, some of the things that I do personally, our school has a grab and go lunch. It's a free lunch for all students. Now, I have food in the house, but I make my kids go get their lunch to get out of the house. And they, you know, it's a mile away, so it forces them out. I also got everyone in the family Fitbits this year for Christmas. And so we have a quota of steps, and we kind of compete as a family. So those are just ways that I'm trying to get my kids out of the house. I will say that we have done a lot of like safe get-togethers with friends. So, you know, and it's usually we'll just do one friend, because I find more than that a little difficult to manage. But I bought these mats that I can sit, you know, more than 6 feet apart. And so a friend comes over and they just have to plop down and sit on the mat, and they can wear their masks, and they can see a friend in person, and they can talk in person, but they're outdoors on a mat. And I find their mood, you know, really goes up after we'll have, you know, a get together like that. But it's really hard.
I think Doris might be dealing with something a little more serious. Her daughter won't shower. She hates everything. And Doris has tried some of the things you're suggesting, and she won't do them.
Okay. Well, you know, if it's at that point, I would recommend maybe finding a counselor. And now is a great time to do that. And I have 2 of my kids are in therapy right now. Most therapists are online. So what that does is it opens up a much broader, you know, collection of therapists that you could see. So my kids they'll just Zoom in with their therapist. But yeah, if you're at the stage of not showering, I would be, you know, viewing that as a red flag, and maybe time for therapy, and also a doctor's appointment to see if, you know, a medication could help. Yeah.
So would you recommend reaching out to the pediatrician or your primary care doctor as a starting point?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, Doris, we're thinking of you. She doesn't want to talk to a stranger. Well, maybe the pediatrician is a good place to start then, since she has a relationship, hopefully, with a primary care doctor. But we're thinking of you, and we're wishing you well, and looking forward to a time when we can kind of go back to normal. And then Lori is sharing with us having students. Oh yeah, that is a great idea. Grab the free lunches to go. And then she's suggesting that Doris should get her daughter into therapy. So good luck, Doris. Thanks, Lori, for commenting. And Kristen Howerton, The Rage of the Minivan. Everybody go get it. It's such a satisfying read. She's a beautiful writer. And it also has some really like hopeful, I'm not alone in this storytelling. So thanks for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.